The silence in a four-bedroom house is a different kind of quiet. It's not peaceful. It's a physical weight, a presence that fills the empty spaces where laughter and conversation used to live. For 3 years, since cancer took my Eleanor, this silence has been my most constant companion. My name is Arthur Vance. For 38 years, I was Captain Vance of the city's fire department, Station 9. I've walked through walls of flame and carried children from wreckage, but nothing prepared me for the quiet emptiness of this house. I raised our son Caleb, alone after Eleanor passed. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say I tried to hold together the pieces of a life she had so beautifully built. She was the architect of our family, the gentle hand that guided everything. Watching her fade in that sterile hospital room was the one fire I couldn't extinguish, the one rescue I failed. Some things a man can never unsee. The house feels too big now. Eleanor's clothes still hang in the closet, a museum of a life interrupted. Sometimes, in the first murky seconds of consciousness, I'll reach for her side of the bed. The cold sheets are a fresh reminder every morning. Those fleeting moments of forgetting are both a blessing and a curse. Caleb was always her pride and joy, our only child. We poured everything into him, every hope, every dream, every dollar we could scrape together. I worked double shifts for years to put him through university. Eleanor took on extra tailoring work from the neighbors, her fingers nimble and quick even as her energy began to wane. We skipped vacations, drove the same sedan for 15 years, and ate simple meals so that Caleb could have the opportunities we never did. When he graduated with honors, I thought my heart would burst. Eleanor was already sick by then, but she rallied enough to attend the ceremony. I remember how she squeezed my hand when they called his name. "We did good, Arthur," she whispered, her voice frail but full of love. "We did real good." Caleb met Sloan at some high-powered marketing firm in Chicago where he landed a job after graduation. If I'm being honest, I never much cared for her from the start. She had this way of looking at you, a quick, appraising glance that seemed to calculate your worth down to the penny. But Caleb was smitten, completely head over heels. When he brought her home to meet us, Eleanor was already bedridden. Sloan spent exactly 7 minutes in my wife's room before claiming she felt uncomfortable around sick people and retreating to scroll through her phone in our living room. Eleanor, a saint to the very end, made excuses for her. "She's young, Arthur. Death scares the young." I should have seen the warning signs then, but a father wants his son to be happy. And Caleb seemed happy, happier than I'd seen him since his mother's diagnosis. So, I kept my reservations to myself. Even when Eleanor passed and Sloan showed up to the funeral, in a dress more appropriate for a cocktail party, even when I overheard her asking Caleb when they could leave because she was bored. Caleb proposed to her 6 months after we buried my wife. He called me, his voice buzzing with the excitement of a little boy on Christmas morning. "Dad," she said, "yes. We're getting married next summer." I congratulated him, of course. What else could a father do? Then came the talk about the wedding. It was a production of epic proportions. The Plaza Hotel downtown, a 5-course dinner for 200 guests, a designer dress, a top-shelf open bar, a live band. The works? "Son," I said gently during one of his visits home, "that sounds like an awful lot. Have you two saved up for this?" He looked at me with those eyes, Eleanor's eyes. "Well, Dad, we were hoping. I know you and Mom always said you were saving for my future. And this is my future with Sloan. The money, of course. The nest egg Eleanor and I had scraped together over 40 years of marriage. The money that was supposed to take us on that European river cruise Eleanor had always dreamed of. Her travel magazines still stacked neatly on her nightstand. The money that could have paid for experimental treatments when the standard ones failed her. The money I'd been living off carefully since retirement, stretching it so I wouldn't become a burden to Caleb in my old age. But what good was money sitting in an account while my only son wanted to start his life with the woman he loved? What would Eleanor want me to do? The answer was immediate and clear. "How much are we talking about, son?" I asked, my voice steady. His voice got quiet. "About, 60,000. I nearly choked. That was more than half of what we had saved. But I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw how much this meant to him. I remembered the little boy who cried when he struck out in Little League, the teenager who held his mother's hand as she took her last breath. He was a good man, my son. "All right," I said finally, the word feeling both heavy and light. "I'll cover it." The relief that washed over his face was worth it, or so I thought at the time. The next few months were a whirlwind of planning. or rather, Sloan planning and sending me the bills. I never saw most of the vendors or signed any contracts, but I wrote the checks, big ones. $5,000 for the venue deposit, $8,000 for the catering, $12,000 for the dress, $3,000 for flowers that would wilt in a day, $2,000 for invitations with real gold foil. On and on it went. I tried to be involved, to offer opinions when it seemed appropriate. I wanted a piece of our family, of Eleanor, to be woven into this new chapter of Caleb's life. Each attempt was met with a polite but firm dismissal. I suggested the little chapel where Eleanor and I were married. I told Caleb one afternoon. It's beautiful this time of year. Sloan, who was on the call, let out a small, tinkling laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, Arthur, that old place? God, no. We're doing the ceremony at the plaza too. It's much more elegant. I tried again a few weeks later. Eleanor's brother Robert is a minister. He would be so honored to officiate. No offense, Arthur, Caleb explained, sounding apologetic, but we're having a celebrity officiant. This guy who was on that reality show Sloan loves. My final attempt was the most personal. I had carefully packed away Eleanor's mother's wedding china, a delicate set with tiny hand-painted bluebells. For the cake serving, I suggested, holding up a plate, it would mean so much. Vintage isn't really our aesthetic, Sloan said, not even looking up from her phone where she was comparing shades of ivory for the tablecloths. Every suggestion brushed aside. Every connection to Eleanor, to our family traditions, was dismissed as if it were an embarrassing relic from a bygone era. Still, I kept writing checks. 60,000 turned into 65, then 70. I started dipping into my retirement principal, the fund I'd sworn I'd never touch. I told myself it was worth it to see my son happy. But was he happy? He was losing weight, and shadows were gathering under his eyes. He seemed perpetually anxious, flitting around, constantly checking his phone for messages from Sloan or the wedding planner. He was a ghost at his own wedding preparations. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for a Friday night at some trendy downtown restaurant that charged $28 for a hamburger. I arrived early, dressed in the new navy blue suit I'd bought for the occasion. Eleanor always said blue brought out my eyes. The place was decked out in what Sloan called minimalist chic. Lots of white flowers, crystal vases, and candles that smelled like nothing I could identify. Sloan's parents were there, dripping in designer labels. Her father, Bradley, was some big-shot investment banker who hadn't stopped checking his phone since I arrived. Her mother, Vivian, had more plastic in her face than all of my credit cards combined. They barely acknowledged me beyond a cool, limp handshake. I found a quiet moment to slip Caleb an envelope. Inside was a check for $10,000, the last of my accessible savings. A little something extra, I told him, my voice thick with emotion, for you two to start your life together. He hugged me then, a quick, hard embrace that felt more desperate than grateful. Thanks, Dad, for everything. I know this hasn't been, I know Sloan can be a lot sometimes. Before I could respond, the wedding planner, a rail-thin woman with a severe bob and a clipboard, clapped her hands for attention. All right, everyone, let's get into position for the rehearsal. Wedding party up front. Family members where I've placed your markers. I moved toward the front where the parents were supposed to stand. I had practiced my part. I was to walk Caleb down the short aisle before taking my seat in the front row. As the father of the groom, I had exactly one job in this elaborate production. And by God, I was going to do it right. I was almost to my mark, a small piece of white tape on the polished floor, when Sloan's voice cut through the murmur of conversation like a shard of glass. Excuse me, Arthur, what are you doing? Every head in the room turned to look. Sloan stood there in a white cocktail dress that probably cost more than my first car, her expression a mixture of annoyance and something else, something colder. I'm taking my place for the rehearsal, I said, confusion creeping into my voice. Sloan gave a little laugh, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. Oh no, we changed the processional order. Caleb's walking in with my parents now. More balanced, since I don't have a father figure to walk me down the aisle. Her actual father was standing not 5 feet away, engrossed in his phone. A hot flush of embarrassment crept up my neck. I didn't know about the change, I said, feeling suddenly awkward as everyone stared. Well, I told Caleb to tell you, she said, flicking a glance at my son, who was suddenly studying the floor like it contained the secrets of the universe. Anyway, you'll just be sitting in the family section over there. She waved vaguely toward the back of the room, a dismissive flick of her wrist. I stood there, frozen. This wasn't just a change in plans. This was my role, my only role, being erased in front of everyone. Family members, friends, Caleb's colleagues, Sloane's entire extended family all watching as I was dismissed like an afterthought, a piece of furniture to be moved out of the way. "Arthur," Sloane said, her voice taking on an impatient edge now, "you're holding up the rehearsal." "Oh." I looked at Caleb, my heart hammering against my ribs. I waited for him to say something, anything, to step in and say, "No, my father is walking me down the aisle, just like we planned." To acknowledge the man who raised him, who taught him to ride a bike and throw a baseball, who had just signed away his life savings for this very moment. But he said nothing. He just kept staring at his shoes. And in that moment, something inside me, something that had been bending and bending since Eleanor died, since Caleb brought Sloane home, since I started writing checks for a wedding that had nothing to do with me, finally broke. "You know what, Sloane?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "I think there's been a misunderstanding about my place here." Sloane's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. "Excuse me?" "You've made it abundantly clear that I'm not really welcome at this wedding," I continued, the words flowing with a clarity that felt both terrifying and liberating. "I'm not family. I'm just the checkbook." A ripple went through the crowd. Sloane's mother made a small, gasping sound. Caleb finally looked up, panic flashing across his face. "Dad," he started, but I held up a hand. "No, son, let me finish." I turned back to Sloane, who was looking at me as if I had just crawled out from under a rock. "I've written checks for everything. The venue, the dress, the flowers, the photographer, everything. Because that's what fathers do. They support their children. But support, Sloane, goes both ways." Her face was turning an interesting shade of crimson. "This is completely inappropriate," she hissed. "You're making a scene." I laughed, and it came out harsher than I intended. "I'm making a scene? Sweetheart, you just publicly demoted me from father of the groom to random guest. I think the scene was already in progress." "Dad, please," Caleb finally found his voice. "Can we talk about this later?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, at the anxiety etched into the lines around his eyes, at the way his shoulders hunched slightly, like he was bracing for a blow. I saw what this relationship, what she, was doing to him, diminishing him bit by bit, just as she was trying to diminish me. "No, Caleb, we can't talk about this later," I said firmly, "because later you'll have an excuse, or Sloane will have an emergency, or you'll just be too tired, just like all the other times." Sloane stepped forward, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. "I think you need to leave," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Sloane, no," Caleb began, but she cut him off with a look that could curdle milk. She turned back to me, her eyes as cold as ice. "You don't belong here. You're just a sad old man who can't accept that Caleb has a new life now. A better life. With me." The room went dead silent. Even Bradley looked up from his phone. "You're just extra baggage," she continued, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You're just in the way." I should have been angry. I should have shouted. But all I felt was a profound, hollowing sadness. Sad for myself, yes, but mostly sad for Caleb. He was marrying this woman, binding his life to hers, and she had just shown her true colors in front of everyone. I looked at my son one last time, hoping against hope that he would finally step forward, that he would stand up for me, for himself. But he just stood there, silent and unmoving. I nodded slowly, more to myself than anyone else. I carefully placed the envelope with the $10,000 check on a nearby table. "I'll see myself out," I said quietly, and turned and walked away. I could feel every eye in the restaurant on my back as I walked toward the exit. I didn't look back. I just kept walking until I reached my car in the parking lot. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, not starting the engine, just breathing in and out, slow and deep, like the department therapist had taught us after particularly bad fires. Breathe through the smoke, find the clear air. Sloane's final words echoed in my head. "You don't belong here." Finally, I started the car and drove home to my empty house. The house where Eleanor and I had raised Caleb, where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases and graduations. The house where I now rattled around alone, surrounded by memories and ghosts. I walked into the kitchen and flipped on the light. Eleanor smiled at me from a photo on the refrigerator door, one taken on our 30th anniversary. Her hair had already started to thin from the early treatments, but her smile was as bright as ever. "You always fight for others, Arthur," she used to tell me. Don't forget to fight for yourself sometimes. I hadn't been fighting for myself. I'd been letting Caleb and Sloan walk all over me, drain my accounts, and dismiss my wife's memory, all because I was terrified of losing my only son. I thought that's what Eleanor would have wanted. But looking at her photo now, I knew better. Eleanor wouldn't have wanted me to bankroll my own erasure from Caleb's life. She wouldn't have stood for Sloan's cruelty for a single second. A new resolve hardened within me. I pulled open the drawer where I kept all the wedding documentation. Contracts, receipts, vendor information, everything meticulously organized, because that's the kind of man I was. Methodical, careful, the kind of man you want leading you into a burning building. I picked up my phone and started dialing. The first call was to the Plaza Hotel. "This is Arthur Vance," I said when the event manager answered. "I'm calling about the Miller-Vance wedding scheduled for next Saturday." "Of course, Mr. Vance. How can I help you?" "I need to cancel the event." There was a stunned pause. "Cancel, sir? We're only a week out. The cancellation penalties at this point are substantial." "And friend, I understand," I said calmly. "I'm prepared to pay the penalties, but the event needs to be canceled tonight." Another pause. "I'll need to speak with the bride or groom to confirm this cancellation, Mr. Vance." "No, you don't," I said firmly. "I am the financially responsible party. The contracts are in my name. The deposits were paid with my credit cards, and I am telling you, the event is canceled." I heard the frantic click of a keyboard. "I see that you are indeed the signatory on the contract, Mr. Vance. This is highly unusual." "Cancel it now," I repeated, "and please send written confirmation to my email." The manager sighed, defeated. "Very well, Mr. Vance. I'll process the cancellation." "One more thing," I added. "Please inform the catering company and the florist. They're your in-house vendors, correct?" "They are. I will inform them." One by one, I went down the list. The photographer, the videographer, the band, the bakery making the 7-tier cake. Each call was easier than the last. Each cancellation, confirmation, was another link broken in the chain of my humiliation, my liberation. The last call was to my bank. I ordered an immediate freeze on all my accounts and credit cards. "I have reason to believe my information may have been compromised," I told the service representative. It wasn't exactly a lie. My generosity had certainly been compromised. When I finished, it was past midnight. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, Eleanor's favorite, kept for special occasions, and raised the glass to her photo. "I fought for myself tonight, Eleanor," I whispered. "I hope you're proud." I slept better that night than I had in 3 years. The storm hit around 9 o'clock the next morning. My phone erupted with a barrage of texts, voicemails, and calls from Caleb. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet. I needed to be clear-headed for that conversation. And right now, my emotions were still too raw. Around noon, the doorbell started ringing. Incessant, angry jabs. I looked through the peephole to see Caleb on my porch. His face flushed, his hair disheveled. Sloan was behind him, pacing and gesturing wildly while talking on her phone. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "What the hell did you do?" Caleb exploded before I could even say hello. "The hotel called Sloan this morning saying everything's been canceled. They told her you canceled it." "What the hell, Dad?" I stepped back, allowing them to enter but maintaining my composure. "Come in. We should talk about this like adults." Sloan barged past me, still on her phone. "No, you listen to me," she was saying to whoever was on the other end. "I don't care what he told you. He's clearly having some kind of senior moment. The wedding is still on." I closed the door and faced my son. "Yes," I said calmly. "I canceled the wedding arrangements." Caleb's face contorted with disbelief. "Are you out of your mind? The wedding is in a week. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I know exactly what I've done," I said, my voice even. "I've stopped enabling this farce. After what happened last night, did you really think I would continue to fund it?" "It was just a misunderstanding," Caleb insisted, his voice pleading. Sloan was stressed. "You know how these things are. There's so much pressure." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated, my own anger beginning to simmer. "She told me, in front of everyone we know, that I don't belong at my own son's wedding, that I'm extra baggage, that I'm in the way. And you, Caleb, you stood there and said nothing." He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "What was I supposed to say? You were both upset. You were supposed to stand up for me." My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "You were supposed to say, 'No, Sloan, that's my father you're talking to, the man who raised me.'" The man who is paying for this entire wedding. But you didn't say a word. Sloane had finished her call and stormed over to us, her eyes blazing. The florist won't return my calls. The caterer says they've reassigned their staff. What have you done, you spiteful old man? I turned to her, meeting her gaze steadily. I've taken back control of my money and my dignity. Two things you seem determined to strip from me. Your money? She spat. It was a gift. You can't take back a gift. I'm not taking back what's already been spent, I clarified. I've paid all the cancellation fees, but I will not spend another penny on a wedding where the father of the groom is treated like an unwanted intruder. Caleb stepped between us. Dad, please, we can fix this. I know Sloane said some hurtful things, and she's sorry. I'm not sorry, Sloane interrupted, her voice sharp. He's been interfering from day one, making suggestions about his precious Eleanor's china and her brother performing the ceremony. This is our wedding, not some memorial service for his dead wife. The room went silent. The cruelty of her words hung in the air like poison. Caleb looked like he'd been slapped. Even Sloane seemed to realize she'd crossed a line. A strange calm settled over me. And there it is, I said softly. The truth comes out. Sloane, Jesus Christ, Caleb whispered, horrified. I looked at my son. Is that what you think too, Caleb? That honoring your mother's memory at your wedding is morbid? He couldn't meet my eyes. No, of course not. But this is supposed to be about our future, not the past. Your mother is your past? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. The woman who carried you for 9 months, who fought to stay alive long enough to see you graduate, she's just the past to you now? Tears welled in Caleb's eyes. Dad, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, son? I pressed. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're choosing a woman who just insulted your mother's memory over the father who sacrificed everything for you. Before he could answer, Sloane's phone rang again. She glanced at it and grimaced. It's the wedding planner. I have to take this. She stepped into the kitchen, her voice immediately turning sugary sweet as she answered. Caleb sank onto the couch, looking utterly exhausted. Dad, please, just tell me how to fix this. The wedding can still happen, I said, sitting across from him. Just not the $70,000 extravaganza I was funding. Scale it back, get a justice of the peace. That's what real people do. He looked at me like I'd suggested they get married in a sewer. Sloane would never agree to that. More important than your relationship with your only living parent? I asked. He buried his face in his hands. Just then, Sloane stormed back in, her face a mask of fury. The wedding planner quit. She says she can't salvage this. She grabbed her purse and pulled out a credit card, thrusting it at Caleb. Use your emergency card. We'll put everything on this. I recognized the card. It was the supplementary one I'd given Caleb years ago for genuine emergencies, connected to my main account. That won't work, I said calmly. Sloane's eyes narrowed. What do you mean it won't work? I froze all my accounts last night. That card has been deactivated. Caleb looked stricken. And while we're on the subject of my money, I continued, looking directly at Sloane, perhaps you'd like to explain the $25,000 charge to the Four Seasons Bora Bora that appeared on my statement last month, the one I didn't authorize. Caleb paled. Sloane's face went blank, the particular blankness of someone caught in a lie who's frantically calculating their next move. I don't know what you're talking about, she said finally. Really? Because the booking confirmation was sent to your email, Sloane, with a copy to Caleb, for your honeymoon. A honeymoon you never mentioned to me, despite the fact that, apparently, I was paying for it. Caleb looked sick. He turned to Sloane. You told me your parents were giving us the honeymoon as a wedding gift. She flushed. They were going to, but then Daddy had some investments that didn't pan out. I was going to tell you, but then I saw Arthur's card sitting on the counter when we visited that weekend. And I thought he wouldn't even notice. He has so much money just sitting there. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. You stole my credit card information. It wasn't stealing, she protested. Your family. I turned to my son, who looked like he might throw up. Did you know about this, son? He shook his head slowly, his eyes wide with horror. Number, I swear, Dad, I never would have. He trailed off, turning to Sloane. You stole from my father, and you lied to me about it. Sloane's demeanor changed instantly. Tears, thick and theatrical, welled up in her eyes. I just wanted us to have the perfect honeymoon. Is that so wrong? Your father has all this money, and what's he doing with it? Nothing. Just sitting in this depressing house with his depressing memories. I'd had enough. I think you both should leave now. Ugh. No, Caleb said, his voice firmer than I'd heard it in years. He stood up, a new resolve hardening his face. Sloan, I think you should go wait in the car. I need to talk to my dad, alone. For a moment, I thought she might refuse, but something in Caleb's expression must have warned her off. She grabbed her purse and stomped out, slamming the front door behind her. Caleb and I stood in silence for a long moment. I didn't know, he said finally, his voice small. About the credit card. About any of it. I swear, Dad. I believe you, son. He sank back onto the couch, looking suddenly much younger and more vulnerable. What am I going to do? I sat down beside him. Caleb, after what you've learned today, are you sure you still want to marry her? He looked up, startled. What do you mean? Of course I do. I love her. Do you? I asked gently. Or do you love the idea of her? Because the Sloan I saw today thinks nothing of stealing from family, lying to her fiancé, and disrespecting the memory of your mother. He had no answer for that. He eventually left, saying he needed time to think. I didn't know if he was going back to her or just driving aimlessly, but I knew a seed of doubt had been planted. 3 days later, Caleb showed up at my door again, alone this time. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, clothes rumpled. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside. He walked into the living room and collapsed onto the couch. I need a place to stay, he said simply. I can't go back to the apartment, not with her there. You're always welcome here, I said, my heart aching for him. That night, we ordered pizza and watched old westerns, just like we used to when he was a teenager. We didn't talk much about Sloan or the wedding. For now, it was enough that he was home. On the 4th morning, I came downstairs to find him sitting at the kitchen table, a small wooden box open in front of him. His face was ashen. Son, what's wrong? He looked up at me, his eyes haunted. Did you know this was missing? I moved closer and felt my heart stop. In the box was Eleanor's engagement ring, the one she had wanted Caleb to have for his future wife, the one I thought was still locked safely in my bedroom safe. Where did you find that? My voice sounded strange even to my own ears. In Sloane's jewelry box, Caleb's words came out hollow. I went to the apartment while she was at work to get more clothes. I was looking for my grandfather's watch, and I found this. I sank into the chair across from him, my legs suddenly weak. She had stolen Eleanor's ring from my safe. I remembered the weekend she must have done it. I had opened the safe to get an old photo album. Sloan had excused herself to use the bathroom. She'd been gone longer than seemed necessary, but I hadn't thought anything of it. Caleb's phone buzzed, Sloan's face lighting up the screen. But instead of ignoring it, he answered and put it on speaker. I need you to come home, Caleb. This has gone on long enough. Her voice filled the kitchen, sharp and demanding. I found my mother's ring, Caleb said, his voice flat. There was a pause. What are you talking about? Her engagement ring. The one that was in my father's safe. I found it hidden in your jewelry box. Another pause, longer this time. When Sloan spoke again, her voice had changed softer, with a tremor that sounded rehearsed. Oh, Caleb, darling, I was going to surprise you. Your father gave it to me before all this unpleasantness. He said I should have it. My blood boiled. But before I could speak, Caleb cut in, his voice laced with cold fury. That's a lie. My father would never give away my mother's ring without telling me, especially not to someone who constantly belittled her memory. Caleb, you're confused. Your father is turning you against me. Stop lying. Caleb's shout was so sudden and raw that I flinched. Just stop. You stole from my father. You stole my mother's ring. What kind of person does that? Her facade finally cracked, her voice rising to a shriek. I took it because it should be mine. I'm your fiancé, but all you and your father ever talk about is precious Eleanor. Eleanor's china, Eleanor's favorite flowers. I'm sick of competing with a dead woman. The kitchen went silent. Caleb stared at the phone, pure shock on his face. In that moment, I saw the final, brutal destruction of what he'd thought was love. You never had to compete with her, Caleb said finally, his voice barely a whisper. But we're done, Sloan. Completely done. I'll have the rest of my things out of the apartment by the end of the week. And if anything else of my family suddenly appears in your possession, I'll press charges for theft. He ended the call and looked up at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I'm sorry, Dad. I should have seen it sooner. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. You see it now. That's what matters. The fallout was messy. Sloan launched a full-scale campaign on social media to salvage her reputation and destroy mine. painting me as a vindictive old man. But then, the tide turned. People who had been at the rehearsal dinner began speaking up about what they'd actually witnessed. The bombshell dropped when one of Sloane's own bridesmaids leaked screenshots of private messages where Sloane openly discussed marrying Caleb for his inheritance potential and detailed her plans to edge the old man out once they were married. Her social media accounts went private overnight. 6 weeks after what should have been his wedding day, Caleb came downstairs for breakfast, looking more like himself than he had in months. He'd been staying with me, slowly rebuilding. He was even considering a job offer back here, away from the Chicago firm where he and Sloane had worked together. "Morning, Dad," he said, pouring coffee. He set his mug down with an unusual decisiveness. "I've been thinking about the money, the wedding money." I waved a hand dismissively. "Don't worry about that. It's done." "No, it's not," he insisted. "That was my inheritance, in a way. Money you and Mom saved for my future, and I let Sloane waste it. I want to pay you back, Dad. Not all at once, but over time. I'm going to make this right." I looked at my son, at the determination in his eyes, at the set of his jaw that reminded me so much of Eleanor, at the man he was becoming again, and I felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly took my breath away. "All right, son, if it's important to you." 3 months after the canceled wedding, I found myself standing at the counter of a brick-and-mortar travel agency. "Some things are better done in person. How can I help you today, Mr. Vance?" the agent asked with a smile. "I'd like to book a cruise," I said. "A world cruise. One of those long ones that goes everywhere." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Those can be quite expensive, sir, and they typically sell out a year or more in advance." I smiled, a real smile that reached my eyes. "Money's not an issue, and I'm flexible on dates. I've waited a long time for this trip. I can wait a little longer." "Any particular cruise line you prefer?" she asked, typing. "One with a good library," I said. "And dancing. Eleanor and I always love to dance." "Eleanor is your wife? Will she be joining you?" I touched the simple gold band I still wore on my left hand. "She'll be with me in spirit. This was her dream trip. I'm taking it for both of us." The agent's expression softened. "I understand. Let me see what I can find for you." 2 hours later, I walked out with a reservation for a 180-day world cruise departing in 8 months. It cost almost exactly what I'd originally budgeted for Caleb's wedding. Somehow that felt right. A symmetry to things. A balance restored. The day I boarded the ship, Caleb drove me to the port. He was in a much better place. He had taken the new job, found a new apartment, and was seeing a therapist to understand how he'd gotten so lost. As we said our goodbyes, he hugged me tighter than he had since he was a little boy. "I love you, Dad," he said, "and I'm sorry." "No more apologies," I cut him off gently. "We're past that now. Just be happy, son. That's all your mother and I ever wanted." "I'm getting there," he promised. As the ship pulled away from the dock, I stood at the railing and watched the city where I'd spent my entire life recede into the distance. The wind ruffled my hair, more gray than brown now. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought I felt Eleanor's hand slip into mine, heard her voice in my ear like a soft whisper on the breeze. "About time, Arthur. About time." I smiled and turned my face toward the open sea, toward the endless blue, toward whatever adventures waited beyond the horizon. "You're right, Eleanor," I whispered to the wind. "You're right.